Hello and welcome to Peaceful at Heart. My name is Cedric Martin and I'll be your host. Each episode, we've taken a closer look at the book Peaceful at Heart, Anabaptist Reflections on Healthy Masculinity. We've dived into the chapters, we've heard from the authors, and we've thought a little bit more about what healthy masculinity looks like in our modern context. Today is our wrap-up, our conclusion episode for this series. And joining us for this wrap-up, this conclusion, is Don Neufeld and Steve Thomas, the editors of the book, as well as Rod Friesen, the Restorative Justice Coordinator for Mennonite Central Committee. Don, Steve, and Rod, thank you for your work on this book, on this series. How are the three of you doing today?
Thank you. Doing very well, Cedric.
Same here. Just fine. Beautiful fall day.
I'm well, grateful for seeing this project come together.
Yes, I'm so glad as well. And I'm really glad that the three of you could join us today and talk a bit more about this book. Rod, perhaps you could start us off by telling us a bit about your role in all of this and when Mennonite Central Committee or MCC got involved.
All right. Thanks, Cedric. So my role with Mennonite Central Committee Ontario started about 4.5 years ago, and I am involved coordinating a team of restorative justice staff, program associates in Ontario, and we provide a lot of support for mainly men leaving prison. So reintegration, circles of support and accountability, and it was through different work that I was doing more nationally with MCC on the Abuse Response Prevention Network, I started to get thinking about the need for engaging in conversations about healthy masculinity. So this sort of led to us having more conversations as volunteers about healthy masculinity, doing some training. And as that evolved, we happened across Don and Steve and their book, Peaceful at Heart. And from there, we just started to connect. And that was about June of 2020. That's
great. Yeah. Appreciate the sort of the backstory there, Rod, and how all this came together. I'm very, very glad that it did, too. It's exciting to see where it can go. Thinking of that, I mean, this is sort of our wrap-up, our conclusion, if you're thinking of it in terms of like the format of the book. And this project's brought some great insight from many different people. I'm curious if I could hear from each of you, what is something that you learned through this process?
Well, I mean, it's been a long process now, both from the initial stages of the book and then the MCC project. I think one of the things I've learned is that men are not easy to reach. Men are, for various reasons, just not engaged in many of the discussions that we've identified as as really critical and hopeful around the movement of men's well-being forward into the future. So that's been a learning, and we're still working on how best to be creative and reach men. Another, I think, critical piece that comes across in the book really nicely is the whole idea of masculinities. The idea that we can't talk about any single definition of masculinity, and although we might have a traditional picture of the cleavers and such, but there's much more to masculinity than any one definition. And I think that's hopeful in the sense that it broadens the umbrella of ways in which men can enter the conversation, and men can find welcome and support for however they identify themselves as men.
And one of the main learnings for me has been just the theme of peace that runs throughout our book, that's reflected in our title, Peaceful at Heart. that, actually then also points to kind of living at peace with all and promoting God's peace in the world, and just the essential connection between healthy masculinity and God's peace. In the course of this book, I was part of a meeting at one of our Mennonite conventions where there was a committee looking at the intersections of different works and peacemaking, and healthy masculinity actually surfaced in the top half dozen initiatives or strategies that are important for promoting peace. So there's this essential connection between our work of promoting healthy masculinity and extending God's peace.
I think for me, as I read the book Peaceful at Heart, I began to really think about these, as Don talks about, really varied or multiple masculinities, and also connected with Steve's comments about peace. And how do we be men thinking about the complexity of gender in today's world, whether it's workplace or church or community, and what does that mean? And we had some lively discussions here with our group of volunteers, men and women, who had taken some training. And as we started to think more about this concept of coaching men, particularly the men that were re-entering from prison in our programs, I began to explore further with Don, talking more about what would be next. And so I think what I'm learning through the process is that as we've piloted book clubs and as we've started to have conversations, as much as it can be challenging to get men to the table, when men do come, they talk, and they really enjoy the opportunity to be able to talk about these issues and share about these issues and what they mean to them directly. And so I think that's been really important. We've had rich discussions here in our first two pilot sessions that we've had with book clubs. And what we know is there's currently not many places and spaces for men to connect and to have these conversations. And so that's been really, I think, enriching and valuable.
Yeah, thank you all. I feel like I've learned a lot through reading the book, through all of these different interviews that we've had. Don, what you're saying about many different masculinities definitely resonates with me. And hearing from all the different authors, contributors, thinking about the different ways we approach what healthy looks like and what masculinity looks like is very broad. As well, thinking about what you're saying, Steve, about peace. I recall you sharing that the main message you're hoping people will take from this book is the idea of shalom. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Okay, yes. This theme of peace is important. As I mentioned, it runs through our book. I prefer to use the biblical word shalom, which is much more robust and comprehensive than our common use of the word peace. And for me, this speaks to God's peaceable order with abundance, security, and justice for all, and well-being throughout all of creation. So it's a very comprehensive, robust definition. And that's what we're really trying to promote in this book and in our new book.
Thank you, Steve. I also really appreciate hearing about the biblical shalom from your perspective, and I'm glad that we have that thoughts shared here in video, but also thinking about it in the form of the book that I remember you writing bits of that as well too. Rod, you touched briefly on this, but is healthy masculinity something that MCC will continue to focus on?
It certainly is, Cedric. We have really identified a need to spend more time and resources in developing strategies to reach men to talk about healthy masculinity. Because as Steve talked about, shalom, or building peace, is really a big part of understanding and helping men come to understanding of what healthy masculinity is. So we're connecting with a bundle of projects within our restorative justice programming called Peace at Home. And as things come together in various ways, we're looking at how one project can build on another. One of our first projects was with Theater of the Beat, as you know, Unmute. And, that was, again, an opportunity during the pandemic to talk about gender-based violence. And a lot of these types of themes start to connect for men as they may also interact with other men and have conversations about what healthy masculinity might look like. And so in doing this, we've also reached out to partners like Mennonite Church Canada, Mennonite Church Eastern Canada, and Be in Christ Canada. And they have come on as partners in Peaceful at Heart to help support the production of videos and audio resources, audiobook. And so there will be this, this set of videos and audiobook that come out of this partnership that we can continue to support book clubs developing across the country. And so that's really our hope, is that we would begin to be able to launch discussions, small group discussions that would lead into other things, perhaps conferences or other things that we would have more opportunity with MCC and through our partnership with Mennonite Men, and with Don and with Steve to promote Peaceful at Heart.
That's great. I'm looking forward to hearing more about what MCC is working on. Of course, Theater of the Beat's also going to continue focusing on these topics as well. So I guess stay tuned for those listening at home, and it'll be a focus for sure. Don and Steve, I understand that you've been very busy working on this as well, and I know that there's a new book coming. Are you able to give us a bit of a brief teaser about it?
As Don mentioned, it's difficult to reach men, or at least it's a challenge. I've observed over the years that many men don't read much. And so this is an attempt to provide yet another pathway to engage men in conversation for men who may be too busy or not inclined to read chapter-length books. We put together a conversation guide that has 70 topics in 7 sections. So with a 1 page of content with over 300 questions for conversation to engage men in deeper conversations. So we discuss big questions about like God, our purpose, basic needs like connection, recognition, meaning, difficult issues like vulnerability, failure, conflict, shame, gritty matters like greed, anger, lust, masturbation, social problems, sexism, racism, injustice, and violence, and sensitive issues like intimacy and sexuality. And then we look at our life roles, a variety of them, including like friends, lovers, leaders, and many others. And so this is a way of engaging men in circles of conversation to address the stuff of life. So this is a companion volume to Peaceful at Heart for those who are looking for a user-friendly discussion guide for a range of topics.
And ultimately, our goal, because of the accessibility, is to have it available both in a digital format at minimal cost, and the possibility of having printed copies also. And this is imminently ready to roll out, and the editing process is almost complete, and we are very pleased with some of the dynamic part of it, both just the ability to move around the document electronically, and we've also had just the strong involvement of an editor and also a creative director who's done some graphics that can also, I think, are very stimulating and challenging, and would also be good conversation pieces. So I think it's a well-rounded piece. It's got a whole bunch of appendixes of various forms of conversation pieces and exercises and ways in which men can engage these topics. So stay tuned.
Wow, that's very exciting. Thank you both for your tireless work on this topic and in this writing. I know it's a lot and it's a big ask, but I'm sure that there will be people, groups that will be able to utilize these resources. And it sounds like you're really listening to what people are saying, and if people are saying, "Hey, we need these big thoughts, these big questions in different formats," I'm glad you're finding ways to approach that. So thank you. In the final sentence of your conclusion in the book, you say, "We acknowledge that this is only one step in a larger ministry of bringing healing and hope to our world." What are some of the next steps? Obviously, you've done some more writing, and that's very exciting. Are there more ways that you hope or plan to engage with men?
Well, we hope to resume our work of retreats, working with our Mennonite camps, congregations, and communities. Next month, for example, I'll be in Chicago leading a retreat on healthy masculinity for Chicago area churches. And so it's the face-to-face work that best advances this work of healthy masculinity. So we're anxious to resume face-to-face engagements with men.
And I think to pick up on that part of the initiative, that working, like Rod was indicating, we have piloted some book studies online, and we want to see how we can make that more accessible and effective, and scale it up so more people can participate. We had, an interesting inquiry from a Mennonite church outside our sort of constituent group who had heard about it and were asking for resources. So we would love to be able to branch out to others within our Anabaptist community and even beyond, to both make the resources available, but also make ourselves available to be in dialogue or to respond to any questions that arise out of their work. For me, the other initiative needs to be the conversation with some of the other players in the conversation about gender, about family well-being, about dynamics of patriarchy and power, and those conversations have been out there for much longer than this conversation has been happening as far as Mennonite men goes. And we want to be part of that larger conversation to bring the voice of men to the table, not just as the problem, but also as part of the solution, to expand the conversation so the average man in the pews can feel that they are invited to participate, that they aren't just the object of suspicion. I'm hoping in that conversation we can shift some of the narrative that leaves men out of the conversation or leaves men in a position of really not feeling safe. And I know that may sound ironic or may sound trivial, given the presumptions about men and violence. But my experience is that there is significant insecurity that needs to be overcome so that men can want to be different than they are, can lean into the bigger conversations and be part of them, and that we can create a joint project going forward in which men can feel an active participant in their futures too.
I will just, thinking toward the future, we at MCC, we have a real interest in promoting the Peaceful at Heart book, but the companion study guide. It has a facilitator's notes in it to help facilitators, those that are interested in leading a conversation, whether it's in their community, in their congregation, about Peaceful at Heart, and in resourcing those individuals and helping them get started, and finding ways for them to be encouraged and to continue doing this work of finding other men to have conversations that matter in their communities. and in their congregations. So not just within, our Anabaptist Mennonite groups, but even beyond, other groups that may be interested in engaging in these different topics, and also sort of continuing to lead along with Steve and Don in the next phases of things they're developing, because we see a real need for these types of resources in our peace work. So we're looking forward to continuing the partnership as it evolves and grows, and we find things that men want to talk about and learn about.
I'm glad that you brought up the study guide, Rod. Earlier today, I was rereading the chapter by Gareth Brandt, Men in Community, in this book, and he was talking about how he had brought together a group for a year for an intentional readings, and then after that year was done, they stopped meeting for a bit, and one of the members reached out and said, "Hey, can we continue meeting even though we're not intentional about this? I want to continue meeting." So. No expectations, but perhaps if groups start gathering together and they start reading through this book and going through the study guides, there might be new opportunities for groups to grow out of this and continue trying new opportunities that Mennonite men are working on, like this new book, Don and Steve, that you're working on, or new things that MCC is bringing together, or just finding that space and community where they can share about their masculinity. That sounds really great. So thank you, Rod, for mentioning that. Don, you had a thought.
I also wanted to say, and in a sense, picking up what Carol Penner challenged us to when she wrote her chapter, is that we do need to do the hard work of delving into men and violence in a way that we didn't choose to lead out on that with Peaceful at Heart. But I think our last chapter, Steve and I and Mennonite men generally have committed to the fact that that is a factor in our society that we do need to take seriously, and look at how we dismantle some of the presumptions and the expectations that both men sort of promote and take on, that gives them liberty, but also things that are put upon men by various expectations in society that contribute to things like violence against others, but also men's violence against themselves. And we do need to participate fully in those hard questions. Again, representing men so that men feel that they are legitimate conversation partners. Not just the problem. I think we can do that. I think the opportunities are exciting about what we can do. I know in some of the conversations with Rod, some of even the internal workings of MCC, struggling with some of the different initiatives and how they come together around promotions of peace, and also then holding accountable those who do not act peacefully. So I'm excited about the possibilities and really hope we can grow that initiative too.
Yeah, that sounds great and very important work done. So I appreciate that you folks are willing to walk that line and willing to put yourselves out there and work in these challenging topics. So thank you for that work, and I'm excited to see what comes next as well. Thank you, Don. Don, Rod, and Steve, it's been a real pleasure working with you on this project. We do, however, need to start wrapping up this chapter. Before we go, though, do you have any sending thoughts for us? Perhaps, Don, you can start us off again.
Okay. Well, I think just the longing to be invited, the longing to be contacted and asked to either resource individual men or groups, or partner with other organizations who want to do this good work, or in some of those larger, maybe even more academic forums of where some of the bigger level questions also need to be considered. Invite us, and we'd be happy to participate.
Yeah, at the end of this project, as men have worked through this, a point that I would like to make is that ultimately it's really not about healthy masculinity, but it's really about promoting one new humanity, where we come out of our gendered spaces and we're working together. It's the ministry of reconciliation that Paul describes in Ephesians 2. That rather in place of two, what Jesus is doing is promoting one new humanity. And that, for me, is what this project is ultimately about. And masculinity, for me, is a bit of a hook. I'll say this at the very end. And so it's really not about even healthy masculinity, but it's something even bigger that healthy masculinity fits into. And that, for me, is the vision of Shalom.
Yeah, I'm just encouraged. I think working with Don and Steve has just been a great opportunity for MCC to take a resource and begin to provide more opportunities for that resource to be shared. And I'm excited, in having conversations with different people, that they're excited as well about how we can use this and grow this important conversation. It's about healthy masculinity, but it's also about creating that peace or shalom, but also, really tackling tough issues like violence. And how do we have those conversations? This book and this study guide and the resources that Mennonite men are creating are really helping to form the type of safe space that we can have those conversations. And I really am excited about that.
I like that what you said there at the end there, Rod, about creating these safe spaces. I hope that can be something that the four of us take, and also those that are listening at home, at their churches, at their congregations, at their communities, whatever space you're in listening to this. I hope that you can take that and think about that as you go from here. Thank you, folks. I really appreciate your time, and on to what's next, I suppose. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peaceful at Heart was recorded in the city of Takaranto, the land covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. This is the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. We all eat out of the dish, and all of us that share this territory with one spoon. We want to acknowledge the ancestral lands and waterways of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Seneca, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Takaranto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We wish to thank them and any other nations who cared for this land. Colonization is a continuing form of oppression, so it is important that we acknowledge the lands and digital spaces that we are holding and taking up. We remember the acknowledged and unacknowledged, recorded and unrecorded, past, present, and future. We are all treaty people.